Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
You're welcome along Wednesday Night Rugby as we look forward to the weekend's action. Very happy to say Keith Wood is with us. Good evening.
Good evening, Joseph.
And Fiona Hayes, Grand Slam winner as well. Evening, Fiona.
Hey Joe, how are you?
Very good. So Keith, neutral venue, your life depends on it. Who is the best team in the world? Who are you picking to represent you?
That's absolutely thrown me straight into it. Today.
Right now. The gun to your head.
Who'll win a game could be, I don't know if it's Ireland. It would be Ireland, New Zealand or France at the moment. But asking me exactly who would win today, it depends who they're playing.
They're playing whoever your second option is, I suppose. The next best. And Ireland know it's to save Keith Wood's life as well. I don't know if that offers them an extra impetus.
What? Ireland know it's to save my life. They might throw the game. I would go with a team that knows how to win in the very big competitions, and that would be South Africa. It would be South Africa or New Zealand, but not New Zealand this year. So it could be South Africa.
All right, okay. Fiona, who's saving your life?
You know me, Joe, I always back my own. I'm going to have to go with Ireland, playing great rupby at the minute. So look, we'll go with Ireland. We haven't seen enough of France. I would have been France up into recent, but they've been keeping quiet. Maybe that's a good thing for them, but we'll see going forward. Okay, well, we'll get a good look at both, obviously, on Saturday, and there's been much talk of world champions and world number one side, and so hence the question. The Ireland A team has been named for this game against the All Blacks 15 on Friday, and that gives us numerous clues as to what team Andy Farrell is going to name for Saturday when he names it tomorrow. So Michael Lowry, Jacob Stockdale, Jimmy O'Brien, amongst others, start on Friday. So it generally leads most observers to conclude that Hugo Keenan will start, Matt Hansen will start, and Robert Balakoon will start in the back three for Ireland. Craig Casey plays on Friday. He captains the team on Friday, actually. So Gibson Park's going to feature for the first time this season. Conor Murray, we knew already, would win his 100th cap on Saturday. Andy Farrell had said as much. And Kieran Frawley, Jack Crowley, both involved Friday. So we can assume Joey Carberry is fit to take his place on the bench. So the general effort at naming the Irish team is Hugo Keenan, full-back, Balakoon, Ringrose Henshaw centre, Mac Hansen on the wing, Johnny Sexton and Gibson Park to start, Andrew Porter, Dan Sheehan, Tyke Furlong the front row, second row Tyke Byrne, James Ryan, and then the guesses I've seen, Peter O'Mahony, Josh van der Fleer, Caelan Doris with Jack Conan on the bench. So is that largely how you'd see it, Fiona? We're not missing anything glaring there, I think. No, I think that looks like the way it's going to go, and especially with the Ireland A team, I wasn't sure about that back three, Joe, but I think that's kind of set in stone who they're going to go with. And I suppose the pictures that we see of them training and stuff, and who's in bibs and whatnot during the week, you can get a sneaky look into who will be starting as well. So I think you're spot on there.
Keith, what effect do you think Saturday has on the World Cup meeting?
I don't know. I think it would be. I think it's incredibly important for Ireland to try and back up what they've done this year, and without stepping back from the initial question that you asked me, I would tip Ireland to win at the weekend. But the manner in which Ireland have played has been a bit of a change from what we've had over the previous 2 years. It is something that has seems to be incredibly comfortable for the players. So I think Andy Farrell has made the players it's simple, but has a lot of options, and it's about people making the right decision, but having 4 or 5 options, and they decide which one they want at different times. And I think that they're good footballers, so that suits them, and I think they look happy playing it, and they look like they're enjoying themselves an awful lot. And every piece of noise you hear is that they're enjoying themselves. There's a lot of fun in this. So how will South Africa pick holes in that? Because South Africa have and had consistently had the ability of demolishing different types of structures and imposing their way of playing. And Ireland need to find out whether there are chinks in that style, because there are going to be chinks in that style over the next 12 months, and it's how do Ireland react to it. So I think it's coming at the perfect time, because it's an awkward, difficult, heavy-hitting type contest that will knock them out of, I won't say they're in a comfort zone, but it'll knock them out of the sort of rosy glow that they've had after winning a series down in New Zealand. So how do they react to it? And can they react to it within the 80 minutes to get the win? My belief is that they will. It comes back to your question at the very start. Will that then be good enough in a World Cup? Would it be good enough for, this is the one game that you have to have a team to win? I don't know if we're there yet, but I think we have a better idea of that conversation after this weekend, because this is incredibly heavy hitting.
Yeah. Andy Farrell, on the heavy hitting point, Fiona, referenced the French game and said there'll be parallels here with that night in Paris, and another kind of examination under the scrutiny of heavy hitting on Saturday. The other thing to mention, I know you watch South Africa right across the year. Any of the games I saw, what jumps out immediately about their defence, as well as the heavy hitting, is just the speed of that rush defence. I mean, they shoot up, and they really shoot up. So how is the Irish attack equipped to handle the heavy hitting and that rush defence?
Yeah, I suppose we're gonna see on Saturday. I mean, that's the first thing that kind of came into my head when I saw this fixture, especially after the All Black series, is, you know, scrum, maul, physicality around the pitch. The All Blacks probably didn't bring that enough during the summer, you know, so we obviously came away from those games feeling very confident. But the last team that we did play was France in Paris, and I suppose we didn't come up trumps in that game, so we're going to have to look at how we can deal with that. And, you know, that blitz defence that the South African bring is really, really good, but they also have players in the midfield that are really, really good at making those defensive reads on when to come up, when to kind of shoot out, or when to leave Ireland play ball. They come up hard in the centre, especially in that pack area, so Ireland have to be able to get gain line going forward. I think it's gain line will be a big thing on Saturday, Joe, how we can get go forward ball to create that extra bit of space for the backs. And it's when you create that space out wide, that's when you have to, that South African defence have to question themselves. Can they shoot up? Do they have to hold? And we'll see if we're able to earn that right to go wide then. Yeah,
the other thing I suppose, Keith, and to an extent this goes for every game because the breakdown is clearly important in every game, but Ireland thrive on fast ball. And again, you think back to that game in Paris, for instance, France did a real number on Ireland at times at the breakdown with big men, and that they went after Ireland at the breakdown. And it is notable, Keith, that they have Dion Fourie and Quagga Smith both on the bench, both, you know, renowned poachers who can really go after Ireland at the breakdown. So you suspect slowing Irish ball down is going to be, and again, I appreciate that's a week in, week out kind of aspiration, but that's going to be big for South Africa, you would think.
Well, it's going to be big for South Africa, but big for Ireland to try and enact fast ball. So we have to resource the rucks quickly enough. You know, it can't become an arm wrestle. Like one of the elements of playing South Africa is that they are incredibly physical. You have to meet the physicality, but you don't have to copy their style of play. And actually, too often, I think that happens, and you get stuck into an arm wrestle. So it's talking about, you know, almost hyper efficiency at breakdown, both from the ball carrier to make certain he can fight his way to the ground, kind of old school almost, to be able to get the ball back to where he's going to be, and the supporting players to make certain that they can seal that off legally and make certain that they're almost tackling the tackler. There was a great example years and years ago, Dave Wilson, who was the Australian captain, and as you were going into contact, he would tackle you, even though he was playing with you. So I played with him for Quins, and he'd tackle the ball so that by the time you hit the ground, he was already popping the ball to the scrum half. And it meant nobody could get anywhere near that ball. So his idea of being a 7 was not to be there for an offload. It was to make certain that the scrum half had the quickest ball known to man. And that was an interesting way of doing it. I'm not saying that we'll do something like that, but we need to make certain that the players that we have supporting are in the perfect position to target the jackler, so the jackler never gets into that position at all. And we've seen an awful lot of instances over the last couple of weeks where jacklers have been wiped out because a player has been a second or second and a half too late, and they've almost had to throw themselves in to have the necessary momentum to move that player, and it's resulted in penalties and yellow cards and red cards. So it's that attention to detail at that breakdown is essential for Ireland.
I think as well, on that, Keith, as well, I think, you know, if things aren't going to plan, you know, they have to have a plan B, that if they're not, you can practice cleaning out these rucks and you can be efficient around that area, but you have to have something else in attack if it's not working. So I suppose they're going to have to look at that area and obviously have a few different options. You know, in an ideal world, we'll be getting that quick ball, but if Ireland aren't getting quick ball, we need to be able to attack and not fall into that South African trap as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, given that we've the two of you on, it'd be remiss of us not to talk about set piece and scrum, given South Africa's strength in this regard for Saturday. So they've gone with a 6-2 split at the on the bench, and I think there's almost a misnomer that they always go 6-2, whereas in the Rugby Championship just gone, of the 6 games, they only went 6-2 for 3 of those games. So New Zealand twice and Argentina. Otherwise, they were 5-3. In the line series, they went 6-2 once. That was in the second test. And if you want a kind of broad feel for things, then since the line series, they've played 16 matches and they've gone 6-2 in 9 of them. So just past halfway. So they've gone 6-2 against Ireland at the weekend. And Malherbe always plays a tight head. Marks of late has been starting, and I was talking to somebody who really knows the South African rugby, and he was saying the way they do it is they tend to work in pairs. So if Marks starts, then Kitchoff works with him, and then they have Ineche and Mbonambi as a pair to come off the bench. We have Cian Healy, Rob Herring, and Finlay Bealham to come off the bench. So this is to what extent is this an area of concern, Fiona? Certainly the replacement trio, there is a question mark there. What about our starting front three against their starting front three?
I think they can be fairly confident going into starting 3. It's that bomb squad is where there's been issues in the past when they come on, and they sometimes even change them up before half time, you know, because they can add that physicality, and it's very hard to scrum while you're tired. Ireland haven't been doing that. I suppose when we look at the last 6 nations, we had a lot of players, even with Leinster at times, we see them both leaving on Porter and Furlong, probably longer than a lot of teams would do. So look, we know at the start of the game that the scrums, they'll have that down, they'll be holding their own, but I think it's after that half-time mark where there's changes need to be made. And look, some of these guys have been standing up. I've looked at Bealham. I think his scrummaging is come on an awful lot with Connacht, and it's these big massive games against these absolutely huge props where we can see really, you know, can they dig deep and can they hold their own ball especially.
Keith, you've been up against it. I mean, you can think back to 97 and famous team talks caught on video. There's a ferociousness to South African scrums, I presume. Do they have different techniques that you might face otherwise, or is it pretty universal?
It's fairly universal. I think if you're looking at the fundamental standard for South Africa is that they are bigger men, so they're taller. Marks is tall. Now, Dan Sheehan is tall. We're beginning to maneuver our way into that idea. But they tend to have a taller front row. They tend to be much bigger men. And you're talking 19, 20, 21 stone. They want to scrummage at a height. Now, the laws would lend itself that you have to scrummage not lower than your hips, and you can't be too low. So that's fine, but you don't have to scrummage at the height of South Africa's hips. You can scrummage at the height of your own hips. So you try and get yourself into a position where you're able to deal with it. But they want to keep it at the highest level possible because that's where they're at their strongest. So whatever manoeuvring Ireland can do to unsettle them, because you don't want to play into their hands. You want to make them uncomfortable. You want to even though there's no hit in the scrum, you want to try and get that balance right where you get more comfortable in the scrum. You try and offset it an awful lot. They tend to put all 8 pushing incredibly hard into it. They will try and hold the ball at the back of the scrum. So the scrums tend to last longer on their put in, because they know how hard it is to hold that scrum. So they want their scrums to last as long as they possibly can, and to see if they can eke a penalty out at the end of it. So the benefit of having a front row on the bench like they have is that they don't really lose any oomph when those guys come on. And it means it's very hard. And we do change our subs a little bit later, and rightly so. Our subs are not of the same standard that South Africa have. There's very few teams in the world. Probably the only teams are France, South Africa, and maybe Argentina that have that strength and depth for scrummaging that comes in off the bench. So, but I think we'd stand up to it pretty well. But it's higher, it tends to be higher. We'll be trying to bring it lower so that you can use their weight against them. That's the most important element. The second you play against South Africa is, how do you use their strength against them?
So do you think Ireland can break even on Saturday in that regard?
Because there's no hits anymore, it makes a big difference. But the pressure is colossal. And it also depends on the amount of rugby that all the players have played, and you're looking at it. So what you're trying to say is, let's get our scrums, the ball in, the ball out, clean strike to number 8, and let's pick an odd scrum when you have the ball to have a go at them. But try not to crumple at any stage. Nobody wants it to crumple, but it's sometimes you can go around the corner. And if you go around the corner, you have to do it so unbelievably slowly so that you don't lose your cohesion in a front row, so that somebody doesn't kind of stumble and you get pushed in over on top of yourself. I think Ireland can stand up to it for a lot of the game. I think it's very hard to stand up for it for 80 minutes. And it requires all 8 forwards to actually feed into that. Yeah,
well, that's the thing, Fiona.
And requires 9 to be unbelievably sharp and smart.
As in, get it out.
Having a ball sitting at the back of your own scrum, you have to know that they're under pressure. Yeah. You have to get the bloody ball out. You can't be leaving it there thinking what you're going to do next.
Spoken like a front rower who's been in absolute hell as the number 9 was having a glance around for a few minutes.
I've killed a couple of scrum halves in my time for the exact same thing, So, look, when you're under pressure, the key part is to try and get a clean strike. And I know the ball doesn't go in straight anymore, but if it gets stuck around the second row and the second row has to stand over it, lift its foot up a little bit, that can destabilise the scrum. And when you're under huge pressure, you don't want that to happen. So you're looking for a clean strike to number 8. If it's at number 8's feet, and if the scrum half can gauge what the pressure is like, you can have the guys to say, let's leave it there. Let's see if we can get one over them. But other than that, get it out of Dodge. Yeah.
Fiona, I bet we can put too much on the front row as well. Having a look at some South African media, they're definitely looking at Etzebeth and De Jager in the second row, and looking at Ryan and Byrne, and talking about that as a real area where South Africa can get on top of Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know exactly what Ty Byrne can bring at back row. I've said it before, second row, probably not quite, as he hasn't played enough, I suppose, in there really to be one of the best scrummagers you could possibly have playing in that position. We know Ryan can bring it. Henderson is a man that you'd love to have behind you in the scrum. So those 2 South African second rows, and your man on the bench, he was playing over in England, Franco Mostert. I mean, he's another big guy to come on in there. So they definitely scrum time. I think that's where they might have a slight advantage, especially on that tight head side. just immense power they can bring through, and they've worked together for so many years. But I think the more we see Byrne in there, and he's been getting more game time in there, especially with Ireland. I'm sure they're working on that. They're working with him to be able to sustain that pressure, and and be able to take that. So it is somewhere. A lot of times we do look at the front row, we blame the props or we blame the hookers, but there just might not be that power coming in from behind, or it could be a slight adjustment in height could offset the whole thing. So they're going to have to be absolutely, working as one, combined and focused for all these scrums.
Yeah, what's your sense of second row here, Keith?
Look, I think the South African second row is excellent. They used to pick Mostert as well, but haven't, because Peter Steph Dutoy is there. He's a huge man as well in the back row. So normally you'd say, well, they've got really big guys, but how agile are they? How comfortable are they? Can you do a bit of damage in them in the line-out? And we have guys we can throw up into the air really well, which we do, but it's going to make that very tough as well. This is why this is a really enjoyable game to call, an enjoyable game to watch. Is South Africa are huge, and we have to learn how to deal with it. So we're going to learn an awful lot about ourselves within this, and we've had some of this discussion in the past, but we don't make those size of men, and we don't have them. So you have to play differently, smarter, more agile, think a little bit differently. And look, the examples for that for the most part have been New Zealand consistently against South Africa. It's one of the huge rivalries, the biggest rivalry probably in world rugby. And it's two absolutely contrasting styles. They're just totally different styles. But New Zealand never try and play like South Africa. They will try and meet the level of aggression and physicality, but they don't try and copy them. And look, we watched the Lions, the last Lions tour, and for me, I thought, the Lions were within an ass's roar of actually winning the series, right? So it's hard to kind of criticize it in terms of a pure winning idea. It was very nearly right. However, it was a terrible spectacle of rugby, because you had two teams trying not to play rugby, or one team trying to limit another team playing, and South Africa playing the style that they've played for as long as they ever have. And I never criticize South Africa for their style, because it works. It works incredibly well. They've huge players. They've got fast wingers that they can, if there's a mistake that's made, yes, they can push them over from a scrum or from a line-out or a maul, but equally well, if they wear them down, they've got guys that can score from anywhere. That's the style that they play. I just don't think we need to match it. And for me, that's the Lions did that the last time. It made for hard watching, and so, yes, it could have been close to it, but I don't know whether it would have been better if the Lions had tried to play to their own strengths.
Yeah, I think we all kind of remember Finn Russell's introduction and suddenly the whole thing opening up in a way that hadn't seemed possible for the previous 2.5 games. On South Africa and their weapons, Fiona, not least because that Lions tour, when, to be fair to them, they had almost no fitness. It was COVID, and they just almost did what they had to do to win, and the spectacle be damned. Over the last year, even a casual eye on their rugby championship games, they do score some electric tries. I mean, maybe they only play in these moments or these flashes, but with Colby at fullback, and apparently the fans have really been calling for that, and so they've gone with Colby at fullback. Arenza lightning on one wing, Mapimpi on the other wing. I mean, they do score devastating tries at times as well. It absolutely will be a surprise to no one, especially as the game opens up, if that back three do some damage.
Yeah, that's it. It's that counter-attack. They're just immense. We saw it even with the South African teams in the URC. If you kick the ball away, we saw it in that Leinster game as well. They can be quite electric. They know where to attack. They like to move the ball when you give them that space. And, when a defensive system is setting up, I think that's when they can really do damage. Colby at full-back, I mean, he's kicking game. Even he hasn't played with South Africa since July, so he's chomping at the bit, I'd say, to get out there and show exactly what he has. We all know it. We've seen him with Toulon. He's probably played a bit at fullback, obviously with Toulon, and the coaching staff have been watching that, and they want to get him in there, and they want to have these options where he can play wing, he can play fullback, and I think there is even chat that if there is an injury, he might even be going into out half as well. So it could be interesting to see with that 6-2 if there's injuries in the back line at 9, 10 or 12, what they do and how they jig things around. Yeah. But look, I mean, Ardenisi, I mean, he was absolutely in the championship. He was the player to watch. I know he had that 4-week ban. He tackled Bowden Barrett. It was a pretty bad one in the air, but other than that, in the games he played, every time he got the ball, he just was absolutely electric and almost Colby-esque. That you wouldn't even know he was playing. He wears the scrum pack, similar style, similar set of feet, and you have a back three that can absolutely attack from anywhere. So it will be interesting if Ireland give them that space and buy into that kicking game. We'll see exactly how South Africa are going to attack that defensive system setting up.
Yeah, and even at 10, Willemse.
Yeah, he's another guy.
He's got dancing feet as well. I mean, he's played a lot of 15 for them. So there's a flair there, Keith. I think we'd all love to see them use it a bit more, but it's there.
I do think they have developed far more flair, and with some of the players they've gone in, I think they'll miss Am in the centre. Yeah. I mean, he's a very unheralded player. He is consistently fantastic defensively as well. I'd be interested to see how Colby gets on at 15. He's not the largest man in the world. You know that we're going to put the ball up into the air and not stepping away from what we would do ordinarily, but you have to test guys that are playing and picked in positions that they don't ordinarily play at international level. So I can see that happening pretty quickly. But look, I think it's a really decent team for South Africa. They are missing strength and depth. So one of the reasons I think they're going 6-2 actually is they've no 10s. All their 10s are injured.
Fair enough, yeah.
So instead of having another 10, they've said Colby will probably drift in from 15 into 10 if need be. That gives them a bit of scope as well. So, and it'll be an interesting occasion because we have Rassie Erasmus back out of being Bobby Boucher, the water boy. So there's no more water boy there. So he's back in being in the coaching arena, let's say. So
Bobby Boucher, one of your great references, I would say, over the years there. Well done.
That's the water boy, isn't it?
Yeah, you're dead right.
That's a blast from the past right there.
Well, I'll tell you, I was definitely trawling into my memory as who was the water boy.
So a final word from each in this game. Who's going to win and why? Fiona, you can get the ball rolling.
I think Ireland will. I think home advantage will stand to them. Obviously, South Africa after travelling over. I think we talked about players being injured and just this is they haven't played a lot of game time. But I actually think it will stand to them in this game. I think you have fresh guys. Hugo Keenan. I mean, they've been training with Ireland. They wouldn't be in there unless they were ready. So I think it will definitely be an Irish win. But it's going to be an immense battle, and if they can't win scrum, maul, line out, that's when Ireland might be in trouble.
Okay, Keith?
Yeah, I think our front row will be under a lot of pressure, but I think they'll be able to take it. I think it becomes very tiring on our second row and back row. I mean, if we scrum as 8, I think it puts us in a stronger position. I think Johnny Sexton is playing the best. I think could be the best rugby. He's not as fast as he was, but his brain is faster than it was. I think we have, even though we have a lot of injuries, it'd be interesting to see how those injuries come back as to what the team has selected as well, as to who is actually fit. So it's hard to make that call. But look, I think we're still on the up. I think we're learning an awful lot. I think there seems to be a high level of curiosity in the team. And as I said at the very start, I think this is, we're playing against a great team. They will play very differently to how we play and what we're used to. I think it's an ideal match for it. I think everything goes into this game for the win, and I think it'll be tight as well, but I do think we have that capacity to do it. I think we have a couple of other things to pull out of the hat that we haven't already, so I'd like to see that too.
Okay, it's one to look forward to for sure. Just a brief mention, Ireland A play New Zealand 15 in the RDS Friday night. The Ireland A team, if you're interested, Michael Lowry I mentioned is playing, as is Jimmy O'Brien on the right wing. The centres, Jamie Osborne and James Hume, Jacob Stockdale on the left-hand side. Kieran Frawley is at 10. Craig Casey captains the side from 9. And then in the front row, Jeremy Lockman, Dave Heffernan Hooker, Tom O'Toole. And then in the second row, Joe McCarthy, Gavin Thornbury. And the back row is Keane Prendergast, Nick Timoney and Gavin Coombs. So Ireland A, Wolfhounds, take your pick, Keith. This seems to be, this concept, a bit of a rejuvenation going on at the moment across the board. What's driving that?
What's driving it is trying to give as many players a level of international exposure as they can, and to try and see, is there a halfway step for teams coming together as opposed to playing with one team. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of the South African trip earlier on in the year, because I think it kind of came out of nowhere. I don't mind them at this time of the year. I don't mind them in the midst of international windows, because when the provincial teams aren't playing, I do think you can give another opportunity in there. So for this, I always thought the A matches, A internationals were vital, because it isn't just the standard of the teams you're playing against. It is the different types of players, but it is coming together with players that you've never played before and getting an opportunity to shine in a slightly looser type situation. So there's a lot on it, but there's not an awful lot on it. And that's an interesting pressure to have. And look, we want as many players that we can put into an Ireland squad for a World Cup, and I think that's the rationale behind it.
Okay, well, Andy Farrell's going to take charge that night, and the first team for Saturday are all going to be there, is the word. So they're definitely trying to give it a certain prominence, that's for sure. Meanwhile, Fiona, the women's game, I guess, is a landmark week. It's one we'll remember when we're charting the course of the women's game in this country in history. So 29 players now contracted. The high performance programme, as it's been talked about, has been launched. So 29 players contracted across 15s and 7s. The money, 15 to 30,000 per annum plus benefits. And I suppose rather than list the 29 players, maybe the players not involved worth mentioning. So Nicola Friday, captain. Sam Monaghan, Niamh Jones certainly catch the eye. Niamh Jones being the Rugby Writers Player of the Year, Sam Monaghan being the Players Player, and Nicola Friday, captain. They are with English clubs. One of the reasons it seems is maybe that they had already signed English contracts by the time the offer in Ireland had come around. Again, I need to confirm that. That's just one of the things I've read. Those English contracts are not massively lucrative either, it should be said, somewhere between 3 and 10k. Reportedly, I think we know about the financial issues in the English game, but they're not insignificant absentees, it must be said. I think the other thing which has struck you and others about the makeup of the squad is that, is it Linda de Jong aside, there's no one in the tight 5 contracted?
Yeah, that's what jumped out at me straight away. I went through the list earlier today. I think there's potentially 7 forwards in the whole 29 in the whole 29 players. You've got Linda, the only probably, like Doherty hasn't really played international second row, but possibly could, maybe Brittany as well, but definitely masters of their trade in that tight 5. There's just Linda, so that to me is pretty worrying going forward. The English players are all forwards that didn't sign the contracts, also that didn't want to move back. So it's definitely, look, it's a brilliant thing. I think it's good. It's the start of something rolling. But what people need to realise is that they've got to start working now. They've got to start working on having, forwards in there. I suppose a lot of the forwards are seasoned in the Irish squad at the minute, so they would have full-time jobs, as you said, playing over in England. I think you spoke about contract sign, Joe. I would say the standard of the week in, week out rugby might have a lot to do with it as well. They love probably playing that Premiership over, and it's absolutely belters of games every weekend. We probably don't have the same standard in IAL with maybe top 4, top 5 teams way ahead of the bunch. So coming back to that, I suppose they don't want to do that. So I would imagine that's on their kind of radar, where they probably play better standard, and that transcribes then into how they play with Ireland. They would view it like that. Okay, well that makes a lot more sense, because I'm sure their Premiership clubs, if they really wanted to go, would say, okay, listen, off you go with good wishes. The other point to mention, and we're back here again, so the opening rounds of the Six Nations go up against the Hong Kong Sevens, so the likes of Bavian Parsons and all the others.
I understand the women's game is coming from a totally different starting position to the men's game, Fiona. But I mean, we bemoaned this on Virgin and on Off the Ball when it was happening in this year's Six Nations, and it does probably look like we're back again to losing a whole cohort of your best players for sevens during the Six Nations. It's just so alien to everything that high performance should be. Is this going to happen again, or is there a way around it?
I think this is going to happen again, Joe. I think they're still looking at that. They obviously, you have management on a sevens that believe that they can win that seven circuit, and then you have 15s that are looking and trying to win a Six Nations. So the best players are going to be wanted by both set of team coaches. So I think we're going to see that for maybe this year and next year. And as those contracts go on and more players are maybe brought into these squads, then you will see people settle into that kind of, I'm playing more 15s rather than playing sevens. There are a few that cross over that will be allowed. Like I remember Anya Breen was kind of training with the sevens, but she was guaranteed maybe to play 15s rugby. But if you're contracted, you also, as far as I know, don't have that choice. So if you're contracted and you're asked to play sevens, you have to go to sevens.
Right, okay. Keith, you were part of that first generation that embarked on professionalism, and some accepted contracts, others didn't. The money, I'm sure, at the start wasn't great, and so we're seeing a lot of those patterns repeat here. It does strike from afar, and I'm not an accountant, and I haven't looked at the IRFU books, but it is, 15k for someone plus benefits is really, it's a part-time sum, really. It's paltry in places. You'd love if some more could be done in that respect for starters.
Well, I do. I mean, it does come down to the affordability and sustainability of it as well, and as to how much the women's game generates. And we're going to have 2 or 3 years of where that's probably at a disconnect. And I would have said that within the 2 or 3 years, and we had this discussion at the start as to whether we thought the Irish game would go fully professional, and it could be a point of being part, semi-professional for a couple of years to try and get it to the point. Even in the first year in Harlequins, we trained at night time, and we were fully professional. Only not all the players were fully professional. Actually, some of them were working in the city. We had maybe 7 or 8 players that were worked in the city. They wanted to continue their job. And actually, when the pressure came on that they had to go and train in the daytime, they said, well, we're not going to do it. And within the Irish contract system from 96, when I went on, the people who were contracted tend to be much younger. A lot of the guys near the end of their career pretty much all called it a day at that stage, as opposed to going professional, because it was a difficult decision to be able to make. And for them, it wasn't that difficult because it wasn't paying enough for them to kind of give up their job. They may have been earning more elsewhere, and that was being the case. And actually, when we had this discussion at the start, we wondered how many would go professional without knowing any of the numbers or anything like that. So I think we're probably in that sort of halfway house stage where it's putting your toe into the water is what professional training and is like. But it's whether that is sustainable. And look, we know full well 15,000 euros it's not sustainable. No. So to what way that works, that would be a fantastic add-on when you've had nothing and you're working a job and you're able to train in the evening time, and that's part of the discussion that's going on.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see how it plays out, Fiona, because I mean, any player who's on 15 or 20 or 25 who turns around to management and says, well, obviously I have to work as well, like that, they'll have to be catered for, because management can't say, what are you talking about, 20k, you have loads, like they're going to have to be catered for. Is there disappointment? I know you can't speak for everybody, but maybe you're able to pick up on the mood a touch. Is there disappointment with the money that's been offered, or what is the mood on the contract situation?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're not going to say too much, but I think they knew going into it wasn't going to be huge amounts offered. I suppose the disappointment is, sometimes you hear of maybe accommodation being helped out with or anything like that, but it doesn't seem like the RFU can do that. So it's just a rise in costs in Dublin, and their training, obviously, all week, so you have to move to Dublin. So there definitely is a sense of disappointment around that. But I think if you look at the names on the list, a lot of the girls are young, so I think Keith's on the money there. They're trying to get that group together. Obviously, they're going to have to, as I said, look at getting some forwards. I mean, if you have one, say, tight head / loose head prop training full time and the rest aren't, and just going to a few camps, you'll wonder how beneficial that is to everyone, and especially when it comes to scrum time and line out time. So they'll have to look around that, and maybe they are sorting out a few things where they're able to get some of these guys some part-time money as well. I'm not too sure. I just know that the money being offered, disappointment there, but some of the kids are obviously delighted to have on their CV professional athlete. I mean, that's what they want to be telling people.
Yeah, I mean, I have an image here of Linda going up against the scrum machine on her own, like it's not funny even, like it must be. I guess, look, they're going to be teething problems as an issue. And with a final thought, with a view to Six Nations, it is going to be interesting to see where all the chips fall now, because England and France way out in front, as we know. Ireland beaten by Wales in Dublin in the first game last year, Fiona, and they had just turned professional in January of this year. So that's going to be that'll be the litmus test in some respects going over to Wales next year.
Definitely, Wales is a big test. I mean, you're looking at England and France as well. They're both in semi-finals of the World Cup, so you'll wonder how many of them will retire, and they'll be starting out a new cycle come next Six Nations as well. So look, there are a few scalps. Ireland will have both those teams at home, but I think the likes of Wales and Scotland, I suppose the extra thing, Joan, we've spoke about this before, is because Ireland aren't in that World Cup. I think they're kind of ahead of everyone else in how this cycle is starting, because there won't be any more drop-offs. All the retirements have happened with not qualifying for the World Cup, so they have a chance. And with these contracts, I think come Six Nations time, we'll definitely see we'll see the skill set, has it risen, and then I suppose we'll be asking the same questions about those 7s and 15s again. Yeah,
I suspect so. Guys, thanks so much. Great chat. Keith, appreciate it. Enjoyed the game at the weekend.
Brilliant. Cheers. Great to see you both.
Likewise. Fiona Hayes, a pleasure as always. Thanks a mil, Fiona.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Catch you later.
Our
Enjoy the rugby.
Coverage on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.